Hello, I am Abdurrahman Awais, and me and my teammates today are going to be presenting how to make mobile phones more ethical. My teammates being Malik Frij, Nabil, Ziad Amr, and Amr Ayub. Approximately 5 billion people own smartphones. Phones are a very essential part of people's lives, and they are used on a constant basis to do basically anything. Phones are very resource intensive. They require a lot of metals and plastics and electronics to function properly. Phones produce around 45 million tons of e-waste every year, and only 16% of it is recycled. The issue ethically today is that companies are barely held accountable for unethical collecting of materials.
Mobile phones are made of components, and these components are made of many materials. From this list, the most important components are the screen, the green board, the keypad, and the battery. The life cycle of a phone has 5 stages, which all have a more or less significant impact on the environment. The 5 stages are as follows: extraction, manufacturing, transport, use, and end of life. The first stage of the cycle is the extraction phase. It is where needed materials are extracted. Materials extracted are mined raw materials and metals, glass or plastic, and coltan for heat-resistant capacitor. Coltan mining causes a lot of issues. These issues are like the money gained from exporting coltan fuels the wars going on in the DRC. Workers get paid poorly or don't get paid at all, and child labor, where more than 40,000 children do cross-border smuggling or dig through piles of mud to extract coltan. The second stage of the cycle is manufacturing, where materials are put together to create the components for a phone. Newly mined minerals are used and barely any are recycled. The third stage of the cycle is transportation, where finished phones are transported from factory to the retailer. The fourth stage of the cycle is the use phase, where we use the phone in our everyday life. The fifth and the last stage of the cycle is the end of life. It's when the phone reaches its end of life and is either disposed of or recycled. What is coltan? Coltan is also known as columbite tantalite. It is a dark black mineral made up of the Earth's elements niobium and tantalum. In 2019, the DRC generated 40% of the world's coltan supply. Due to the mineral's unique capacity to store and release electrical energy, it is employed in smartphones, computers, and other gadgets.
I'm going to give you a quick introduction about the DRC. The Democratic Republic of Congo is the largest territory in sub-Saharan Africa. The DRC is blessed with extraordinary natural resources such as cobalt and coltan mines. The third largest number of poor people on the planet lives in the DRC. 73% of the population were estimated to be living on less than $2 a day in 2018. A great part of the DRC's wealth comes from mining because of the increased production and need for minerals and metals such as coltan and copper. Here comes one of the major problems that the DRC is suffering from, which is mining. Coltan is mined by hand in the Congo usually. The miners are barely paid and their work conditions are horrible, and many children and teens are forced to work in such an industry. To access the coltan below, groups of men clear the muck of streams and dig basins. The coltan ore's enormous weight caused it to sink to the bottom when they sloughed the water in the big tubs about. Over 40,000 child and teen miners work to extract a large portion of the nation's coltan. They probably quit the school or never got the chance to go because they are from rural Kivu villages and towns. Since the extractive industry is mostly unregulated, it offers tempting employment prospects to vulnerable kids who operate as a source of low-cost labor.
Didier Verbruggen, Italy, recounts some of the measures taken in an attempt to seize or at least control the violence in the DRC. In 2003, the United Nations Security Council imposed an arms embargo and sanctions regime. Hence, a UN group of experts was founded in order to oversee the situation and assist the Sanctions Committee. While their efforts were focused on armed groups and any other illegal entities that could be subject to sanctions, it later became evident that the members of the FRDC were central in the perpetuation of human rights violations and involved in the exploitation of minerals in the DRC. In late 2010, the OECD's year-long efforts culminated in the final draft of a due diligence guidance, which was constructed based on input from high-level governmental, industry, and civil society stakeholders. The UNGV on the DRC were instrumental in the conception of these guidelines. companies across the supply chain implemented these guidelines. All North Kivu comptoirs abiding by the guidance represented an important step in harmonizing the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo's current mining reform initiatives. In 2010, the US Senate passed the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act. This law dictated that companies that sell their products which contain conflict minerals within the United States would be required to register with the Securities and Exchange Commission and publish a yearly report detailing the resources of all of these minerals, especially if they were sourced from the DRC or neighboring territories. In essence, this would be used to name and shame companies for their unethical behavior, which might turn their consumers away. The EC attempted to follow in the footsteps of the Dodd-Frank law, except with one key difference. Governments would be asked to track down and sanction unethical companies rather than simply leaving it up to the consumers. In 2010, President Kabila decreed that all exports and exploitation of minerals from the provinces of North Kivu, South Kivu, and Maniema were to be suspended until further notice. Unsurprisingly, an overall mining embargo resulted in consequences on the livelihoods and overall security of the locals. When the efforts of state agencies proved insufficient in monitoring the embargo, the FARDC was called to further restrict the mining sector. Meanwhile, other non-state groups were left to their own devices further near the interior.
Alternatives to using unethical materials. There are many companies that have recycle initiatives, and that is their main goal. A really great example for that is the Fairphone, that is extremely eco-friendly, and they strive to almost have over 50% of their materials recycled. They also are part of the Conflict-Free Tin Initiative, which is very helpful for conflict-free resources. And the Solution for Hope project that takes coltan from conflict-free areas like the Kataga in the DRC. PhoneBlocks is another brand that is doing very similar things to Fairphone, but instead their main focus is extreme repairability. They also advocate for urban mining, which is the recycling of old electronics or e-waste, and they advocate for the longevity for phones. The Conflict-Free Resource Initiative is an initiative that supports over 180 companies, and it contributes resources, including the Conflict-Free Melters program and guidance documents for conflict-free resourcing, so companies can become more transparent.
Applicable solutions to the situation. The approach to the solution should be adapted to fit the context of the miners. It shouldn't only make companies more ethical, but also improve the lives of the workers instead of disengaging them. A solution to improve the workers' quality of life is to set up an education or support centers for them so they can develop themselves and in turn improve the state of the mines. Also, a collaboration between the Congolese government and the companies should be made to support and educate the workers. Company solutions. There are 4 solutions that a company can apply to make their work more ethical. Refurbishment is where phones are professionally restored and come with a warranty and return policy. Apple is an example of a company that takes in and sells refurbished phones. End of life. Phones contain very high value materials and minerals that can be reused. Companies should be more responsible for the end of life of a phone, and rather than them being thrown away, they should be reused for the materials. Transparency. Companies have only been recently obligated to be transparent about what's going on in the background. If a company is more transparent about where the materials are and manufacturing comes from, this will make them choose violence-free minerals and reduce their carbon footprint. And finally, design. Phones can be more efficiently designed themselves, where their lifespan can be longer. For example, replaceable parts and allowing the consumer to repair themselves. This actually won't affect sales at all and might boost it, since people look for convenient phones and would like to buy new components that are better and so on. Thank you for listening to our presentation.